Hey there, Roothaven Grounds family. You know what gets me excited? Finding creative solutions that save money, reduce waste, and make our gardens thrive all at the same time. Today I'm sharing one of my absolute favorite DIY projects that checks all those boxes. Building a drip irrigation system using nothing but recycled plastic bottles. I'll be honest with you, when I first heard about this technique, I was skeptical. Could something so simple really work as well as expensive drip irrigation kits? After testing it in my own garden for several seasons, I can confidently say yes. Not only does it work, but in some ways, it works even better because you have complete control over customization. Let me show you exactly how to set this up in your garden. Before we dive into the how-to, let's talk about why this method is so effective. Traditional watering methods, whether with a hose or sprinkler, have a major flaw: they waste water. A huge percentage evaporates before it ever reaches the roots, and much of what does hit the soil runs off or sits on the surface where it's not needed. Drip irrigation solves this by delivering water directly to the root zone slowly and consistently. When you use plastic bottles for this purpose, you're creating a reservoir that releases moisture gradually right where your plants need it most. The soil around the bottle stays consistently moist without becoming waterlogged, which is the sweet spot most plants love. Plus, you're keeping those plastic bottles out of landfills, which makes this a win for the environment too. I've used this system on everything from tomatoes and peppers to squash and melons, and honestly, the difference in plant health is just remarkable. Deep watering, encourages deeper root growth, which means stronger, more drought-resistant plants. And you'll also notice way fewer issues with fungal diseases, since you're not getting the foliage wet every time you water. Not all plastic bottles are created equal when it comes to drip irrigation. Through a bit of trial and error, I've learned which ones work best for different situations. For most vegetable plants and larger perennials, 2-liter soda bottles are your best friend. They hold enough water to keep plants hydrated for several days, depending on your climate and soil type. 1-liter bottles work beautifully for smaller plants, herbs, or in containers where space is limited. I keep these on hand specifically for my pepper plants and those smaller tomato varieties. And if you're growing something really large and thirsty, like pumpkins or big tomato plants, don't be afraid to use gallon milk jugs or even larger water jugs. Make sure your bottles are clean before using them. I give mine a quick rinse with warm water and let them dry completely. You don't need to remove the labels unless you want to, though I find unlabeled bottles look a bit tidier in the garden. The key is starting with containers that aren't cracked or damaged, as you want them to hold water reliably throughout the growing season. Let me walk you through the most straightforward approach first. Take your clean plastic bottle and use a hot nail, small drill bit, or sharp knife to poke holes in it. This is where you have room to experiment based on your soil type. If you have sandy soil that drains quickly, you'll want fewer, smaller holes. Clay soil holds moisture longer, so you can get away with slightly larger or more numerous holes. I typically make 4 to 6 small holes around the bottom third of the bottle. The holes should be about the size of a pinhead to start. You can always make them bigger if water isn't draining fast enough, but you can't make them smaller once they're punched. Space the holes evenly around the bottle so water distributes in all directions. Here's where it gets interesting. You have 2 installation options: bury the bottle or leave it above ground. For the buried method, just cut off the bottom of the bottle completely and remove the cap. Then, dig a hole next to your plant that's deep enough so only the top inch or 2 of the bottle sticks up above the soil. The open top becomes your filling point. And hey, if you bury it at an angle leaning slightly toward the plant's root zone, you'll get even better water delivery. The above-ground method is simpler and works great too. You just keep the bottom intact with your drilled holes, remove the cap, and nestle the bottle into the soil next to your plant with about half of it below ground level. Both methods work, but honestly, I prefer the buried approach for larger plants because it encourages deeper rooting and is less visible in the garden. Once you've mastered the basics, there are some clever modifications that can make your system even more effective. One technique I absolutely love involves creating a slow drip cap system. Instead of removing the cap entirely, just drill tiny holes in the cap itself and keep the bottle sealed. Fill the bottle, screw on the perforated cap, and turn it upside down, burying the cap end into the soil. This creates an incredibly slow, steady drip that's perfect for plants that like consistent moisture. Another upgrade is adding a piece of old pantyhose or fine mesh fabric over the holes before burying your bottles. This prevents soil from clogging the openings while still allowing water to seep through. I learned this trick after dealing with clogged holes one too many times, and honestly, it's been a game changer. For rows of plants, you can create a connected system using bottles and tubing. Just drill a hole near the top of each bottle and thread thin tubing between them. Then fill the first bottle, and gravity will move water through the system to distribute it among multiple plants. This takes a bit more setup, but it's fantastic for row crops like lettuce or beans. Like any irrigation system, your bottle setup needs occasional attention to work its best. Check your bottles every few days, especially during hot weather when plants are drinking more. The beauty of this system is you can visually see when bottles need refilling, unlike buried drip lines where you're just guessing about moisture levels. Every couple of weeks during the growing season, just take a moment to inspect the holes and make sure they're not clogged with soil or algae. A quick poke with a toothpick usually clears any blockages. If you notice water draining too quickly or too slowly, you can adjust by enlarging holes slightly or adding more bottles around particularly thirsty plants. At the end of the season, I pull my bottles out, give them a good cleaning, and store them for next year. They'll last multiple seasons if you take care of them. I also use this time to evaluate what worked and what didn't. Maybe certain plants needed larger bottles, or perhaps I should have placed bottles on opposite sides of the plant instead of just one side. These observations help me improve my system year after year. Even with the best setup, you might encounter a few hiccups. If water drains too fast and your bottles empty within hours, your holes are too large or too numerous. Try using bottles with smaller holes, or even partially plug existing holes with silicone sealant, leaving just enough opening for slow drainage. On the flip side, if water barely drains at all, your holes might be too small or clogged. So you'll want to clean them thoroughly and maybe slightly enlarge them if needed. Sometimes the issue is actually the soil type. Heavy clay can create a seal around the bottle that just prevents drainage. In this case, mixing some sand or compost into the soil around the bottle can really help improve water flow. If you notice your plants still look stressed, even though you're refilling the bottle regularly, the position might be the issue. Bottles should be within 6 to 8 inches of the plant's main stem for most vegetables. You want to place them between the stem and the outer edge of the foliage, where those feeder roots are most active. The brilliant thing about this bottle irrigation system is just how adaptable it is to different garden setups. In raised beds, I like to bury bottles at planting time so they're already in place as the plants grow. For container gardens, smaller bottles work perfectly, and you can adjust the drip rate by changing the hole size to match the container's drainage. If you're growing in-ground in areas with inconsistent rainfall, this system can be a real lifesaver. I've had fellow gardeners tell me it's made the difference between losing plants during dry spells and maintaining a thriving garden. The slow, deep watering builds plant resilience in ways that surface watering just can't match. Consider your climate when deciding how many bottles to use per plant. In hot, arid regions, you might need 2 or 3 bottles around larger plants. In cooler, humid climates, 1 bottle might be plenty. Start with 1 and add more if you notice the soil drying out too quickly between refills. There you have it, friends. Everything you need to know to create your own recycled bottle drip irrigation system. This is one of those projects that seems almost too simple to work, but once you try it, you'll wonder why you didn't start years ago. The combination of water conservation, improved plant health, and recycling really makes this a true gardening win. I'd love to hear how this works in your garden. Take photos, share your results, and don't forget to subscribe to Roothaven Grounds for more practical gardening solutions like this. If you found this helpful, share it with your fellow gardeners who could benefit from this money-saving, eco-friendly technique. Together, we're building a community of resourceful, creative gardeners who prove that the best solutions don't have to be expensive or complicated. Now get out there and give those plastic bottles a second life in your garden.